Great-grandma. When I saw that, I thought, anyone who sends me a picture of their great-grandmother, you're in. Anyway, Brian wanted me to share this with you. He's never spoken before. He's very nervous. But I told him, there's no reason to be nervous here. We're all your friends, we're all your family, and he's going to do a great job. And I'm sure he's going to. So without further ado, please welcome Brian. What is Brian? Pohle. Pohle. You get the name. Thank you.
So I have a very loud projection. I may not need the microphone. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
It's better with the mic.
Okay, so forgive me. Alright. I'll just stand a little ways away from it. First of all, I'd like to express how humbled and honored I am to be speaking here today in front of such distinguished members of the brain injury community. Thank you so much. And also, just note, I hope I don't disappoint. So, over the years, following the brain injury I sustained when I was younger, I began to realize that I'm not one of a kind. And that's not a bad thing. I guess more than anything, it's a humbling experience. It's a reality check. For the longest time, I thought I wasn't one of a kind. This poor soul who sustained a terrible, traumatic accident in which my life had been drastically changed, ruined even. Poor me, I cried. Oh, I tell you more than once, I cried to the heavens above. Why me? But as I've aged and matured and seen more of life, I began to realize that I am not a one of a kind. And that's not a bad thing. I have made mistakes in life, and so have others. I tried to take the easy way out, and so have others. I suffered a brain injury, and guess what? So have others. I guess it's our ego that tries to make us feel that we're the only ones that go through hardship, that we're the only ones that go through this most unfair, most unfortunate set of circumstances. Excuse me. I have always been very determined not to let my brain injury define who I am. It has made me into the man I am today. Yes, but what I mean is, I never wanted to let it impede me from achieving the things that I wanted to achieve. Of course, I have learned that there are some things that I will never be able to do again, or as well again, as I was able to do before the brain injury. And that is a hard pill to swallow. But once I realized that I was not alone, it liberated me. It freed me from my pity party. I became more compassionate, more understanding, more human. I was finally able to heal. I opened up to the possibility that other opportunities may exist. I wiped up the spilled milk off the counter and looked for other glasses to fill. As they say, when one door closes, other doors open. But first I had to get over what I could no longer do to see what I could now do. That is a hard thing to do. I know. Trust me. I know. Bonjour. My name is Ryan Pohle. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak at this year's Canadian Brain Injury Conference here in Montreal. This is my story. I remember being 7, 8, 9 years old. My dad would kneel behind the sewer in a courtyard, and I would stand maybe 20 feet away on flat ground, throwing the ball over to him. Over and over and over again. Every time effortlessly throwing the ball into his glove. At 10, my pops put me into baseball, and I found my calling. For For years, my parents were trying to put me in extracurricular activities, hockey, boxing, soccer. My mom even put me into violin lessons and modeling. Nothing ever stuck. But baseball, that was my calling. Not to blow my whistle, but I was beyond my years. I knew how to play the game, and I knew the rules instinctively. I was a natural talent. It is strange, because as I got a little bit older, I became very cocky on the baseball field. I knew I was good, but I didn't really know how good. I always compared myself to others. I always worried about the things that I couldn't do well. I was very insecure, so I tried to compensate for these things. I wanted to be the cool kid, the tough kid. You know, I was mean to kids, and I'll admit it. I was a bully. I acted out in class, and I was the class clown. So, at 14, hanging out with the cool kids, I was going to try and say something witty, but forget it. So at 14, hanging out with the cool kids, selling weed, being a punk kid, walking down an alleyway one beautiful fall evening at the beginning of grade 9, my friends asked me if I wanted to smoke crack. I didn't even know what crack was at that point. I was an ignorant little boy, still fairly innocent, unaware of the power that God instilled in me to be and to do something great. I decided to throw everything away because I refused to listen to my mama and was full of insecurities. I battled that crack addiction for just over the next year. I dropped out of grade 9 to go to drug rehab. I even had to quit baseball for a little while. I returned to play my last year during the summer of 2002 when I was 15. I was still in drug rehab that year when I played. We won gold at the Western Finals. I got released from drug rehab just in time to start the second semester of grade 10. At this point, I was a complete lost cause and on the path to destruction. To this day, I still struggle with how I could have thrown such talent away. I think I got infatuated with this concept of instant gratification. I wanted it now and I didn't want to wait. I lost a passion for the game, granted, and I think I got bored with life. I got lazy and I didn't want to work. I wanted to be a punk kid. Or perhaps I wanted to experience something different, something more exciting. Or perhaps it was because I failed to take the risk-all prescribed to me by my doctor to battle my extreme ADHD. Either way, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't make that same mistake twice. What follows over the next year, until August 13th, 2003, is the story of a little boy so confused, lost, insecure, who throws his whole life away to become a drug dealer. I vaguely remember this, and my mom is the one who reminded me of it years later. That summer, she asked me why I was not playing baseball. I replied in my 15-year-old know-it-all wisdom voice that, "Oh, Mom, I want to take a break. It'll be there my whole life." How wrong I was. That summer, probably only a couple of months after my mom and I had that discussion, if that long, on August 13th, 2003, I suffered the brain injury that I still can't believe happened. The brain injury that changed the course of my life. I curse it for many reasons, both mentally and physically related. But you know what? Although I curse it, it is... Pardon me for speaking so loud. Although I curse it, it is the best thing that ever happened to me. It was a blessing in disguise. It is just a messed up thing. Something that I never imagined happening. I was invincible. How could I have suffered a brain injury? The morning of August 13th, 2003, while I was driving around selling drugs, I decided to stop in a Mac store to buy drinks. While I was inside, a friend of mine that was in the passenger seat jumped to the driver's seat. When I returned, he asked me if he could drive. So I let him. At some point thereafter, we got in an argument about his driving, and I told him to pull over. While I was walking around the car to switch seats, this is where he started to pull slowly away. Now see, during that summer, around the same time, other people that used the truck would perform a stunt called skiing. This is where the person on the side of the vehicle would hang on to the vehicle with their feet on running boards, hands on ski racks, like so, while the driver would do 10 or 15 kilometers per hour. So, as I noticed him pulling slowly away, remember, I can't remember any of this, but I was told that this was what happened. So as I noticed him pulling slowly away, I jumped on the side of the vehicle, and instead of him maintaining the status quo speed of 10 or 15 kilometers per hour, he pinned the vehicle, he pinned the accelerator to 60 kilometers per hour. At least that's what it was approximated at. At which point, he slammed on the brakes, and I flew through the air. I don't think that's important. I flew through the air. No, pardon me. So I flew through the air, and I hit my head on a curb, traveling 60 kilometers per hour. Following the brain injury, I was in a coma for just over 3 weeks and in the hospital for 6 months. While I was in coma, I was assessed a level 3 on the Glasgow coma scale. There was little hope for me, and I don't blame them. I mean, who's to think I would come back given my current conditions? I had perfectly good organs, and there were other children that could use them to help save their lives. One day, the hospital ordered in a specialist to determine if I was legally brain dead. I'm sure, as all of you know, that if I was pronounced legally brain dead, then the doctors would be able to take me off life support without the consent of my mother. These specialists determined that in fact I did have minimal brain activity, and therefore the doctors were unable to remove my life support without the consent of my mother. Plan B. The doctors approached my mom and told my mom that at this point she should consider my future quality of life. They said I would probably never come out of coma, and if I did, I would probably remain in a vegetative state for the natural duration of my life. In response, my mom said to give her a day and she would return with her answer. As my mom recounts, that night she went home and raised hell to the gods above. She declared that if I were to die, she would be coming up next, and that they did not want that. The next morning, my mom dressed casually as she was preparing to ask me if I was going to fight for my life. My mom arrived at the hospital and entered my dark, quiet room. As a matter of fact, I do remember my mom asking me if I was going to fight. At that time, I didn't understand what was going on. Just in a dreamlike haze, I heard and saw my mom asking me if I was willing to fight. Apparently, in the meantime, I obeyed her commands to squeeze her hand not once, but twice, and as this was occurring, a bright light began to emanate out from our hands and from the sky above. 3 tears also fell from my eye. In fact, as my mom recounts, she looked outside at one point and saw a doctor walk by. She just hoped that he would not look in. Following this encounter, My mom had absolute certainty that I would recover. To the dismay and disbelief of the doctors, she informed them that I would be all right, and she would not consent to the removal of my life support. Not very long after, I was transferred to the Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital in Edmonton. It is hard for me to recount coming out of coma. I think I remember I would just lie there, not even thinking what I was doing there, but just lying there motionless at times before falling back asleep. I couldn't move. Slowly, I began to sit up. The nurses would keep putting me on my side, and I think I would lay there for hours. But I never wondered what I was doing there. It was sort of just natural. As a matter of fact, I don't remember thinking at all. Later on, I remember the guy responsible for the accident came with a couple of our other buddies, and he asked me if I remembered what had happened. At first, I nodded my head, laughing. I would laugh at everything. But then I thought about it and realized I didn't know what happened. See, at first, while coming out of coma, I communicated with family and friends by spelling out words on this piece of paper with letters on it, sort of like a keyboard. By pointing at the letter, I would slowly spell out the words so I could communicate with my friends and family. After I thought about this question and realized that in fact I didn't know what happened, I typed this out for him. He looked shocked and disheartened and told me the story. I laughed. I remember my physiotherapist would always tie me to the stretcher that would start with me laying down and then rotate me up so as to stand me up straight. I guessed to strengthen my spine, but let me tell you, it hurt so much. She took me in the pool where I sank. That lady worked with me so much so that I could be able to walk again. After a little while, with the aid of crutches and a walker, I started walking again. I got to the point where I was healthy enough that I could take weekend visits. I remember when I was 16. I was 16. My mom and I went into Safeway, and I was standing just beyond the lobby doors, holding onto a walker, weak and pale. I couldn't believe what had happened to my life. When I got released from the hospital to start high school, I was a mess. I remember my mom bought me the catcher in the ride. At first, I would arrive to school early in the mornings after catching the school bus, and I would sit in one of the cafeterias and just read. Also at this time, right as I got released and went into the environment of a high school atmosphere, there was this international basketball tournament taking place as well. I didn't really get into the details earlier, but before the brain injury, any sport I played, I was one of the best at. When I had the opportunity to play high school sports and excel at them, I thought it was too good and too cool for them, and decided to smoke weed and cigarettes with the cool kids. With the cool kids. We all know what happens to the cool kids anyway. Anyway, I guess that was an appropriate joke. So during this time, I tried really hard in school, and I wasn't trying to be the class clown anymore. I saw those kinds of students, and I thought that they were idiots. I saw the athletes, the pretty girls, the geeks, the cool kids, and there I was. I couldn't relate to any of them. To be honest, and I've had some trouble deciding if I was going to put this in the speech, but since I do think it has a little bit of merit, I'm going to add it in anyway. I was now the kind of kid that had the brain injury not occurred, I would have probably made fun of. Slowly, I started not to take the school bus home anymore and started to get picked up from my drug dealer friends. I dropped out maybe a week later because I just couldn't do it anymore. I had to go back to people who I related to and who accepted me. Life was not as I remembered it, and I needed an escape. From 16 to 19 was my rise and fall in the drug game, short-lived. From making decent money, probably nothing compared to what I could have made if I had stuck to sports, to being locked up in the penitentiary. During that 3 years, though, I started my healing process in an atmosphere with people who accepted me for being me, for who I was, and despite my physical challenges, I felt good about myself because I was making money and was accepted. After being released from prison, after a parole violation when I was 19, I realized my drug dealing days were over, and I had to change my ways if I wanted to make it in this life. I realized jail sucked. I gave my life to drug dealing, and it just did not return what I put into it. So I said, forget it. I had my chance, I failed. With all of this in mind, I knew that all I had left was school and baseball. From February 2007 to August 2010, I grinded my way through Northwest College, a community college in Edmonton, while I played baseball, apparently fought with my mother every day, trying to get over the mistakes of the past. I started writing journal entries during this period in my life as well. Many of them open up with curses to the big man above. It was a tough time for me, trying to rediscover who I was and trying to make sense of where I was, why this life went the way it did. I got good enough marks to get accepted into university, and I got good enough at baseball again to make the University of Calgary baseball team. Like I said, I graduated from Northwest in August of 2010. Too late to start school in September of that year. So I decided I would take the year off to train for work, So I decided I would take the year off to work to save money for school and to train for baseball. A long story short, but within a couple of weeks, I got demoted to janitor. Now, I didn't want to look for another job because I didn't want to sacrifice. So I thought I'd take a shortcut and sell drugs again. Heck, that would make me enough money to pay for school tenfold, and I've learned from my past mistakes I am sure to succeed. Have I said yet how wrong I was? While I was in the remand this time, this is where I started to find God. At first it was rocky, and I was very questionable of many of the doctrines. But 5 years later, I like to think anyway, God and I have a very strong relationship. I don't know if the brain injury was a part of God's plan or not. I'm pretty sure that I had enough talent to make the majors, and with enough commitment and hard work, I would have been a shoo-in. Unfortunately, I lacked a work ethic, I got involved with other things, and I blew the opportunity. I made my own choices. Now I am where I am because of those choices. In retrospect, everything came easy to me before the brain injury, but as a result, I learned drive, determination, and gained a work ethic. It gave me appreciation for life. I'm now in university in my third year in a combined degree in finance and actuarial science, working as a dishwasher, trying to sell the screenplay I wrote, which is harder than I at first thought it would be, and making mistakes time after time, paying the piper, and I'll tell you, it sucks. Washing dishes, closing dish pit sucks. But my past life experiences, my new perception of the world, and my newfound security with being me, for better or worse of course, has now given me the strength to be able to fulfill my destiny. God bless you. I will graduate university, I will sell my screenplay, I will begin a scholarship for troubled youth. I will achieve these things, and none of it could have been possible if I did not go through the hardships of suffering a brain injury. It is important to me also to reach out to troubled youth and try to help prevent them from going down the misled path I went down. I want them to know that instant gratification is not worth it, that they can achieve anything they put their mind to given the set of talents that they have, and that acts of juvenile delinquency are not worth it. Most of all, I don't want them to live with the types of regrets I lived with because of ignorance, because of trying to be cool. I believe that wasted talent truly is the saddest thing in life. The trials and tribulations I have gone through because of the brain injury, and that I continue to go through, is life. All of us go through these things. But if we face the challenges head on and fight for what we want and believe in, more times than not, we will accomplish them. And if we don't, we are still better off than if we didn't try. After the brain injury, after 6 years of working hard, albeit a federal sentence, I finally realized that baseball was finished. I wake up every morning and I curse the mistakes that I made. I sometimes lay in bed and I think of what could have been. But when I realized that these things were finished, I began looking for other things to exploit with the skills that I now have. Here tonight, I've tried to share with you that although the accident that led to my brain injury drastically altered the course of my life, in a sense, it was my salvation. Only God knows how my life would have turned out otherwise. I struggle with the challenges of the brain injury every day, and to be honest, I wish I didn't have to. Sometimes I truly hate the consequences of this brain injury. With the help of God, my mom, and my support system, I hope to achieve the things that I am now capable of achieving. You know, maybe I'll achieve these things that I said I hope for, and maybe I won't. But I won't know either way unless I try. In closing, I want to thank my mom for coming with me on this trip to Montreal. I want to tell my mom in front of all of you how much I love her and how much I appreciate her. Even if I don't always show it. I love you, Mom, and thank you for never giving up on me. I would also like to thank my dad up in heaven for his love and support, and apologize to him for my mistakes and actions as well. This was my account of the circumstances surrounding my brain injury. For a different perspective, my mother's, please check out her book, Only Son, Only Child. Please check out her book, Only Son, Only Child, by Ray Turner. Thank you for listening to my story here today, and may God bless all of you. Thank you.